Welcome to the Fox Den, your destination for candid business insights and essential life wisdom. I'm Nathan, and in this show, we cut through the noise to focus on what actually works. From the classroom to the boardroom, we're covering it all. So let's pull up a chair and let's get started. I'd like to introduce our guest today, Jeff Lawy.
Yeah, thanks.
Jeff, tell us who you are and what do you do for a living?
Yeah, so I started off in tech sales, international sales, and I worked basically in lasers, robotics, and AI for many years. And then I transitioned into helping tech startups the last couple of years. And now um, I've been advising startups. I have my own startup, and I'm on some boards.
I understand that you're working in something called deep tech. Can you explain what deep tech means? Because people have heard of tech, or they've heard of high tech. They don't really know necessarily what deep tech is. Would you like to touch on that?
Sure. So that's kind of a newer differentiation. So, if you go to if I'd gone to dinner parties in the past or dinner parties now and I said, oh, I work in tech, um, a lot of time they think that's IT or programming or something like that. And so what deep tech is really, it's differentiating from, it's a subset of existing tech where we're focusing more on like the sciencey engineering side of tech.
Do you have your own business what's your service or what's your product that you're selling to people?
Yeah. So right now the main focus is a company that focuses on blood biomarkers. So we have literally thousands of things, thousands of molecules flying around in your blood, and those are biomarkers that, doctors only test a fraction of those. So if you go to your doctor and you get, your cholesterol and your hormones tested, vitamin D, things like that, they only typically check for 20, 30 things. And then if you pay privately, you can get, 50 things, some companies even 100 things, but there are literally like 10,000 biologically significant molecules or biomarkers in your blood that could be tested and giving you different levels of insight. Some of those markers could be inflammation markers, and some of them could be, for example, just markers that say you have general inflammation and not that useful. But there are others that could give you much deeper insights into your health. And so there's all kinds of markers in your blood, and you can get incredibly deep insights once you start looking at a larger variety of markers.
Okay, let me ask you, did you have this blood markers, did you have this checked on your own blood?
So initially, this came out of some PhD research. So this technology comes from, they're using it in pharma. It's used in research labs around the world. I'm going to be part of the first group that did it, but um, the research that it comes from has already been tested with thousands of people around the world. But no, I actually haven't had it tested myself throughout this process of building this company. So we're looking to launch this summer, and then I'll be part of that group.
Is Tovia, is it Tovia?
ATOVEA.
Oh, ATOVEA.
Yeah, yeah, we're just rebranding before the launch.
So if someone were to look this up, they wouldn't find anything about it?
We do have a website under Ashera Health, and so we're just rebranding that as Atovia. And so basically everything's going to be switched over in the next little while.
Okay, so if it's ATOAE,
EEA. I literally just bought the domains. So the only stuff that's out there is really the LinkedIn, the LinkedIn that exists. So so other than that, it's all under Ashera Health, which will be
well,
rebranded, like I said.
you're not gonna like this. I just typed it in. I'm gonna share the screen so you can see here. What came up was stoves.
Yeah, because there's nothing there. I literally just bought the the domains. So we've been under stealth. We've been under stealth startup mode, and so we're gonna be transfer everything over. We haven't officially launched yet.
No worries. So this is not like the launch that Drake's doing downtown with the ice block, and we need to wait for this to melt for this to come to life, or what's the story?
No, no, I think what we're so a lot of it's quite popular for a lot of startups to be in kind of like stealth startup mode. The goal really isn't to publicize ourselves and get a lot of attention for investors and the public. We're going to do essentially like a slow MVP launch, and so we're looking for the first couple of 100 clients and then to slowly grow larger and larger. So the website will be up and running soon, but like I literally last week bought the domains and decided to rename it. Years ago, it was very easy to find a domain for a company, like a company name and domain, but it's actually a big headache trying to find a name and domain because there's, companies around the world that are looking for a .com, companies in Indonesia, in Malaysia, in, Uruguay. So it's not just, like 20 years ago when you could pop in a domain and it was easy to find. Um,
Well, it's funny because as you're saying that, I'm thinking of, do you know the channel NAS Daily
yeah, of course.
and the NAS.io? So he just put out, and by the way, he's not paying me to say this. I wish he was paying me to say this, but he just put out over $1 million, and he made this public. He put shorts about this to purchase nas.com. I'll show you for a second. I'm also just experimenting with a screen share idea. But he put out this nas.com. Here's the website, and again, spending over $1 million to change it from nas.io to nas.com is pretty wild. Pretty wild. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so I think the .com, if you're gonna start your business, if you're gonna have personal branding, you really want to start with the .com. I've advised there was a startup in Israel and they had, I believe, the .io. I'm trying to remember what dot they had, what domain extension they had. I believe they the .io. And I told them like you really need to have the .com because if your company starts to get bigger, one, if you ever want to get that .com, the price of that .com is going to be go higher and higher. The other thing is that people can siphon off customers to your competitors. So if I have the .io and then somebody else has the .com, every time somebody types in the .com and you have advertisements to your competitor, they have advertisements to your competitors. They can be siphoned off customers. You want a name, and I could give a whole 45-minute talk on just how do you name a startup, but ideally you want it memorable, you want it easy to spell, you want it less letters, you want to have all the main version domain extensions. So finding a name is actually pretty difficult. One that relates to maybe people that are not even looking to start a business, like some of your audience, is for personal branding. So in the time of AI, you can say, okay, websites are not as valuable. We're just going to be using AI everything. But the key thing is that AI pulls thing from the web, right? And so if you are looking for personal branding, you're looking to build your company, um, domains, websites are still very important because that's where AI could be indexing you so that when somebody puts in a search, I want to look for a local XYZ in your city, that's where they're going to be finding you. I have a colleague that I've been mentoring a little bit, and she has a tequila business, and she's top ranked in tequila, specialty tequila and high-end tequila here in Toronto. And it's not, because she did, AI engine optimization. It's optimization. She just did basically a regular website and some basic SEO on her website, and the different AIs that she's tested it with, they obviously indexed her, right?
Right.
So this
Right.
goes back to, like, if you're a software engineer, you may want to, or you have a specialized hobby that you want to find people, or a side gig or whatever. You still want a website that has a good name and domain, and at least some basic SEO, so that so that people can find you, not just with Google, but the AIs, as they index the web, can find you. And a lot of that is really, they've used different terms, but it is at the end of the day search engine optimization.
We just had that experiment. I know you're in stealth mode, but again, if someone is
I'll
searching
I'll have stuff
for
I'll have stuff up and running in the next little while, and they could look us up on LinkedIn. So I just did the LinkedIn company page a week ago, and then that should be up and running soon. But I don't even have the website up. I just literally just purchased the domains, the .com, the .io,
right.
um, all of that stuff.
I I guess search engine optimization or SEO is a whole topic unto itself, and people get paid to have companies just like this one I'm just looking at here, sponsored content, semrush.com, only focused on, again, your SEO strength 0 to 100, and it's crucial. And it,
Yeah, I wouldn't want to get too sidetracked in the conversation, but I would say, there's some tools out there that you can use. I know SEMrush, people have mentioned that. It's gonna sound like they're
yeah.
sponsoring the podcast or something,
Well,
but but
so far it sounds like we've had NAS, NAS Daily, NAS.com, and now
yeah,
this other one. There's no sponsors for this podcast, but
yeah,
if you're interested, hit me up because
yeah, yeah.
um we're up and coming here. But let me ask you a question. Speaking of up and coming, um what did you it's very complicated stuff that you're tackling, this blood marking, and we're going to get back to that in a moment. But when you were 18 years old, so let's rewind the tape. Surely you weren't thinking, I want to get into blood markings and deep tech, because there's barely any tech when you were 18. I think we're roughly the same age. This was pre-internet. And what did
Well,
you
not
think you were?
pre-internet. I'm not that. I don't think either of us are that old that it's pre-internet. But but
Well, so pardon me, not pre-inter. I meant at least pre-cell phone. How about that? Mobile phones.
I mean, in the early '80s, I mean, there were those brick phones that people had in their car,
Yeah,
but
but
yeah, they
no
weren't
one.
they
Yeah,
weren't
but no
carrying
one.
them on each
No one.
other. You're right. You're
I
right.
never had. I always tell people I never had a cell phone until I was in my in my 20s. My basically early 20s, mid 20s, and again, YouTube. I was I'm reading a book about this, about screen addiction. YouTube came out when I was 24 years old,
Yeah.
right? For one example, or the iPhone when I was 26 years old. So I never had it. Was the internet around? I remember growing up before the internet. I mean, it sort of got, maybe the military had it, or the
Academics.
different
Academics had it. Academics had it.
academics. But even then, I think this was not ubiquitous among people to have internet, to have mobile phones, and let's not talk about the guys who
But I would say,
spent ten
look,
thousand.
tech parents, where tech was, building motorcycles and cars and airplanes, right? And that was like where all the engineers were excited. And for people like, who remember the space race, which I guess is more our grandparents' age, um, or some of our parents' age, tech was space. And so now tech, when people say tech, they're often thinking of programming, computers, quantum computing. They're thinking of all kinds of compute power based tech. But at the end of the day, like tech, there's been different waves of tech. There will be different waves in the future. And I think when people are looking about leveraging their own skill set, going in, which direction they're going to head. When I was 18, I just knew that I wanted to be on the business side of technology. And so, oh, you can hear my dog squeaky toy. Sorry. Lola, I'm just gonna take this squeaky toy. Wait, she's
I
moving
think
over.
I think maybe Lola wants to be on the podcast. She wants to share her opinion.
Yeah, yeah. So basically, what I'm saying is, I've met people that don't have any tech background or from an education background. They didn't do, engineering or physics or chemistry or anything in STEM, and they went into like tech sales or on the management side or product management or even tech companies, they need accountants, they need lawyers, they need graphic artists. So in my particular case, I knew that I wanted to be on the business side of tech. And so that's why I did a STEM degree. But you don't necessarily need a STEM degree to leverage tech, right?
What did you see yourself doing at that young age? You saw yourself going into it, into tech on the business side, but just with different tools. And now that we have these new tools, you're running with that. Is that
Yeah, well, I think the question is what do you want to do on your day to day? You know what I mean? And so I liked learning about tech. I liked talking about tech, but I didn't want to specifically be in the lab stuck on one specific problem, right? There is a lot of enjoyment you can get of solving a specific problem or one specific problem, one specific major problem. And so that's not to say that that could be a fit for somebody else. I was problem solving, but I wasn't, spending, let's say, a 5-year process and a PhD solving a technical problem. I had a lot of different customers. I was solving a lot of different problems. The bigger problems I would give to my team. So that's why I kind of enjoyed being on the sales side of things, traveling to see customers, suppliers, partners, things like that. And so this way, being on the business side of tech, I was deeply entrenched in the tech world, understanding trends and what was happening. But I wasn't necessarily stuck in the lab. And so I think when you're looking to see like what do you want to do in your day to day makes a bigger difference than what are you going to study during your university time. So I studied physics, applied physics during my university, um, and that experience overlapped well with what I did and what I'm doing, but I didn't become a researcher, right? And so when people are thinking like, what do they want to do in university? Or what do they want to do to upskill, whatever certification or degree, it's great, but you have to look at what is the day to day that you're going to be involved with. So I have a friend, he started his master's in chemistry and he realized he did not want to be stuck in the lab, and then he transitioned into becoming a doctor. He went to med school and then became a doctor. So it's very important that you look at, um, what are your skill sets and how could that be used for the day-to-day activities that you want to be involved in.
by the way, where did you go to university? Can I ask?
Yeah, in Montreal. So I'm based from Montreal, and I moved to Toronto a couple of years ago, and so I went to Concordia and also MBA John Molson.
Pivot points that pushed you in this direction, or was it just gradual from day one? You've always been interested in technology, or did you have some kind of a flash of an epiphany of one day where like, oh my God, I got to go in this direction?
I think I've always been interested in how the world works. I think everybody's always interested in how the world works, and there's different ways of understanding how like getting the answer to that question. And so there's the business aspect, how does finance work? There's the science answer, and different types of answers in science, obviously, that you could study. And so I was very curious about more how, the business side of the world works, and also how the science side of things works. And so that's why I kind of pursued those two things. Um, One thing that I would recommend for a lot of people is just, be multidisciplinary, because the more things you know, uh, the more valuable you'll become.
So become like a renaissance man from a certain perspective.
Your main core that you're focused on, and also, learn about other areas, because once you're multidisciplinary, or even if you have two main focuses, that you can outrank yourself, um, with competitors, and you'll find opportunities that you wouldn't even known existed out there.
Was there ever a point where you felt like maybe this is not for you, or you felt like quitting? It's very challenging to start a business. What's the hardest part for you in this process? And have you ever considered maybe you should just, throw it all in and become a truck driver or something?
Yeah, well, I don't know about truck driver, because they're always saying, truck drivers are going to be replaced, or some truck drivers will be replaced. Y- I
Comes back to tech, doesn't it?
I think from the tech answer, it would be very difficult. They call it the last mile problem, which is, driving in a straight line in nice weather is easy to do, but the last mile is going to be difficult. So I think with a lot of tech roles, where we're seeing disruption is that they'll need less truck drivers, or less people of a specific skill set, in certain areas. So that could be disruptive. But to answer your question, I think mindset is incredibly important. And to overlap your mindset with doing something that makes sense, that's aligned, I would say, with both your gut and your values. And so if your gut is telling you, something's wrong, there's a problem there, and if something is not aligned with your values, then I would say that at that point you definitely need to reevaluate that this may not be a right role for you. Or your subconscious might have picked up on something that, this is not the right thing, for a variety of reasons. But I would say like some of the bigger challenges are really, um, going out and getting mentoring, getting advice, and having some of that being conflicting, right? Because you go out and you hear things, and you can hear 180 from one person compared to what you hear from another, and deciding on what is the right path forward could be a bigger challenge.
What's your North Star? If you're getting conflicting advice, is it just a matter of coming back to your gut and feeling what does Jeff want to do in this situation?
I think it has to be a mix of all three, right? Because your gut you can get wrong. Um, so you have to look at it analytically. You have to look at it, what does your gut say? And then you have to look at it, is it aligned with your values? And I think if all three are roughly in the same direction and there's just some risk involved, then I would say go forward with it. If one of them is flashing warning bells, like, okay, it's aligned with my values, analytically on paper it all makes sense, uh, then maybe you shouldn't.
But it is a tricky line to walk for sure, because like you said, your gut could be wrong. And at the end of the day, you have to make your decisions, and it's all going to be on your shoulders, right? So I just want to pivot back a little bit towards the blood work, because surely you must have people or detractors saying, hey, listen, I'm not giving my blood to any company. um I believe was it 23 and Me?
They've had
I
data
believe it was.
breaches. They've had data
I think they had
breaches.
I think they
Yeah.
had data breaches, and I think that ultimately they went out of business because they were sharing people's data. I know they had
I
like a
so
saliva swab, but
so
your
there
blood, when you give a blood sample, that's something completely different, right?
yeah, well, I would say the reason that they went out of business was more of a business model problem. So once you get your DNA done once, you're not going to go back and buy another DNA test from them. And so now we know there is a business model where you can do additional tests with your DNA. So you could get, for example, your pharmacogenetics done, which is basically when you check your DNA as to which drugs you're more or less sensitive to. But at the time, they were just testing your DNA only for ancestry. And once you get
Right.
it tested once, you're not going to go back and get it done. And so although they did have a data breach and they had some issues there, their biggest problem was really their business model, which is, a one-time buy. So you have your customer acquisition cost, and then once you bought, they're not coming back again.
But if there's 8 billion people, which I guess not all of those people obviously are going to be able to afford it or to be able to do
And,
it.
and also look, if my sister did it, if my brother did it, what do I need to do it, right? Because
Well,
like,
you might
how's
you
my
might you
ancestry? I mean, it could be
you might find
different.
out you might find out some surprises that you
I
never knew.
could, it could, but if I look like my sister and my brother, then I'm like, I'm not expecting a lot of surprises. But at the end, but at the end of the day, I think the reality is that with health testing, right, what's happening today and what's happening tomorrow could be slightly different, although unlikely to be massively different. But what's happening today and what's happening 6 months from now or a year from now could be radically different, depending on lifestyle, what you're eating, your environment, um, random genetic mutations that cause cancer, a million and one different things. And so that's why, your health changes. Um, and DNA ancestry testing, um, it did change over the course of the evolution of that company, but it was more just that their model got better. So the first people who had their ancestry tested, it was very kind of rough. And then as it got better and better, they can tell you in more detail like what subgroups you were part of. But DNA testing is more the building blocks of who you are, and blood testing, looking for the blood markers, what molecules are flying around in your body, that's a snapshot of what's happening you today. And so they're both valuable, because if you have some blood markers that are like flashing some warning signs, but then your DNA says that you're predisposed to that specific disease or cancer or whatever, then that becomes a bigger signal. So if you have some markers that say, let's say you're have a certain disease and it's not definitive, but it looks like something might be starting. And then again, you're predisposed to that disease in your DNA, then I would definitely go and check that out.
What advice would you give young people who are starting their careers?
A lot of people, there's conflicting advice out there, and I think for each person, they need to have advice tailored to themselves. I've definitely heard the whole follow your passion, and then some people say don't follow your passion because that may not be paying endeavor. But I would say,
Very analytical, but like let's say for you, like what has worked for you, and if you could do a redo, would you do anything differently? Would you do the exact same things, or how do you speak to that?
I think I would do a lot of the same. Maybe obviously make some decisions differently, get to places quicker, but at the end of the day, I think it comes down to doing an analysis of your not analysis of yourself, but like, just think about what are your skill sets, what are you good at, what do you like doing, what do people compliment you on? They're like, oh wow, you're really good at these specifically things. And so not to say you shouldn't improve the things you're weak on, but you may want to double down on the things that you're good on. And so when they sometimes say follow your passion, it's not necessarily like, okay, I want to do underwater, with basket weaving necessarily, but double down on those things that you're good on, improve the things that you're weak on, and especially if you can continue reading and educating yourself on those topics, um, you'll definitely find something.
All right, Jeff, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. Where can people find you if they're looking to support your work and follow your endeavors here?
Yeah, feel free to add me on LinkedIn. I would say that's the best thing. So just Jeff Lawy, Lawy, on LinkedIn. And at Tovia, we're going to be launching later this year, this summer, with our initial client tests and growing from there.
All right. Thanks again, Jeff. I'll let you get back to your work, and we'll be talking to you soon.
All right. Have a good day. It's great chatting.